Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Author. Tonight we have Reverend Ames Swartsfager, and he wrote the book Between the Devil and the Deep, and another book, Voices from Prison, and a couple others which he'll talk about a little bit later on. A little bit about Reverend Ames. The Reverend Ames Swartsfager, an Episcopal priest, arrived in San Francisco in 1951 at the age of 13, where he had his first taste of intercity ghetto life. At this time, he began living the life related in this book. He married and started his career in journalism at the San Francisco Call Bulletin, where he worked for several years and then became a photojournalist for the Valley Ho Times, Herald, and New Chronicle. Graduating from college, he entered seminary in 3 years, received his Master of Divinity, and was ordained an Episcopal priest. He was a missionary in Central America for 3 years when he returned to the States. His journey took him to New York as an associate chaplain, which led him to 22 years of working with the incarcerated people, and that's where this book comes in. Voices from Prison, where he talks about his experiences working with incarcerated people. He retired in 1991 and devoted his life to sailing. He cruised through the Caribbean, Venezuela, and Colombia for 3 years and lived in Cali and Cartagena and Colombia for almost 2 years. He was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis in Colombia, which ended his ministry there. After 10 years recuperating, he has assisted in churches in Texas and Washington, and now he is an honorary assistant priest at the Trinity Church in Tarrytown, Connecticut. Welcome, Reverend Ames.
Thank you, Jason. I'm glad to be here.
My pleasure. Let me just get a little bit closer.
I'm very happy to have this chance to talk with you about my books.
Well, you have a very interesting story. We already met, and I did an article for the Connecticut Association of Authors and Publishers. So I know about your story and history and how you became an author. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. And it was something you wouldn't expect, the childhood of somebody who would become a priest, but actually you might. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and how that later on led you to become a reverend.
Well, my childhood was great until I was 13 years old. We lived in Texas, and my father was a priest. And when I was 13, he took a job in San Francisco in the Mission District at St. John's, the Evangelist, at 15 and Julian Avenue. And he didn't realize how bad the neighborhood was. It's not, Mission District looks beautiful. It's got these nice pastel houses and things, but they're, I call them a whitewashed tomb full of dead men's bones because they were filled with broken families, broken children, broken husbands and wives, and everything else. And this was my first chance of getting into this, and it wasn't a fun thing for me. I can remember my first day walking out to junior high school. I almost tripped over a man who was lying dead drunk, a wino, dead drunk on our pathway out of the house, and it got worse that week as I went to a school. I came from a little school of maybe 300 people total in the junior high school to one with about 3,000 people total in the junior high school, 4 stories high, called, what was it called? I can't remember. Everett Junior High School.
Everett Junior High School.
Yeah. And one day I almost got stabbed by a guy. And so I ended up having to join a gang, the White Shoe Gang, 22nd Street White Shoe Gang. There were many gangs. We had Mexican gangs, we had black gangs, we had Indian gangs, we had just about every kind of gang you could think of, and we were all in competition to see how bad we could be. And by joining that band, it was my life insurance, because if they beat me up, then they'd have the whole gang to take
Care of you.
take care of them, which they would have very happily done. And I did that for about 2.5 years, and I was saved by being permitted to go to the magnet school in San Francisco, which was Lowell High School, and that and maybe 2 other people from our class went at the same time. And that got me out of that part of the Mission District, but I was still living in the Mission District, so it was a tough life. I lost several teeth, like about 5, as I remember.
Back.
Yeah, I don't want to go back there.
No, they don't grow back.
No,
Teeth
they don't grow back. No, they were adult teeth. So I did that, and actually during that time I was very anti-God. God was just somebody that my parents and the government used to try to control me. And I got pretty far off into that for a while until I got to college. And in college I knew something was wrong, something was missing. I didn't know what. So I thought it was religion. So I went to a guy said, "Why don't you come to the Church of the Blue Flame?" Now that's something Christian. And I said, well, that's got to be different. So I went there, and it was naked girls jumping through blue flames.
What year was that?
That was in 1958, 57, 1957,
okay.
yeah. And then I went from that, because it did not satisfy my spiritual side. And so I joined the Vedanta Society, which is the Hindu Philosophical Society, where we discussed all the Vedic scriptures and everything else, which was good, and it affected me. I still have some of that in me. And then I left that and finally got back into Christianity, having gone around all the churches, Catholic and Protestant. I didn't think it'd be.
So you were you didn't go to what your father had been necessarily?
I ended up there, yes.
You did end up there.
I ended up
but
there.
You made a search outside first.
Yeah, right, first. And it was because I was more comfortable with the way they did things. And actually, it's a more open church. You don't have to, your theology doesn't have to be so defined as it is in, say, the Roman Catholic Church. And it's got more scripture, in my opinion, than other churches in Protestant, where they preached all the time, but you didn't hear the scripture.
So then you became an official minister. You went
No, then I went into journalism.
Oh, okay,
That's right, and worked on 2 papers, the San Francisco Call Bulletin, which is now, I think, called the News Call Bulletin. And that's when I married my dear wife. And then we went out and became photojournalists at the Vallejo Times, Herald, and News Chronicle for about a year is all. I got a job offer in San Francisco at the Call Bulletin to become a...
When you say photojournalist, were you writing stories or just photographing?
I was writing stories and...
So you had experience in writing, because now you're an author.
Yeah.
Also, and you authored books. So you had experience in writing.
I had experience in writing,
Okay.
yeah. It was a different kind of writing than books are.
Right.
But yes, I had experience in writing and taking pictures. I got... they called me back to Call Bulletin to put me full-time as a cub reporter. And the day before I was supposed to start that job, I got a telegram that the Call Bulletin was going to join with the news, San Francisco News, and they were letting go their whole editorial staff, including me. So there I was with about 150 newsmen trying to find a job in the newsroom.
At the same time?
Yeah,
in the
all
same
at the same
locality.
time. It was funny. And we all met together at the Sizzler, which they had a steak for $1.19. You could get a steak and a baked potato. And we all ate there and shared where they had been, who's looking for what. And so finally I gave up and went to a job in Standard Oil as a clerk, senior clerk. And I finally decided that I was really a rotten person, because I was undercutting everybody I could so I could get up the ladder.
The ladder.
Yeah. And I didn't like that when I looked at myself. So I had a big thing during Monday, Thursday. I was in that church in the middle of the night, and God and I had an argument. We always argue. It's never such, God says, do this, and I say, yes, sir. It's God says, do this, and I say, no way. And he wanted me to become a priest, and I didn't want to become a priest because I knew what priests had to go through. My father went through it all, and he was dead by this time. And I said no, and he said, yes, that's no excuse. And I said, well, what about the fact that I lived this terrible life when I was a teenager? You can't have a priest like that. And he said, yeah, well, that's why we want you. You know, and so that's how I got into it and went through all the school and everything. And I had a choice in my mind, either going inner city mission work or going to foreign missions. I went foreign missions because I didn't want to go back into the inner city.
Right.
And had a very enjoyable time in Central America. Well, meanwhile, I had a friend in seminary.
Were you sailing at this time?
No,
too?
I didn't buy I bought my first boat in Central America. Had no idea what I was doing, and almost killed us all. And my wife would attest to that if she were here. But it was a nice boat. We sailed it. I learned some things about sailing, and then when we left, a couple of years later, we left because the president of the country didn't like me and threatened to shoot me and shot up our house a little bit, and it scared my wife. And I have to admit, it scared me too. So we moved out. And we got a job as an associate rector of a church in Middletown. And Middletown was right where Woodstock showed up the next year. And they got kicked out of Middletown, and they had to go out to the farm.
Middletown, New York.
Middletown, New York. They had to go out to the farm.
And we're talking Woodstock, the rock festival.
Yeah, 1969 Woodstock.
So what is your connection to Woodstock? You wrote that you were the Woodstock
chaplain.
Chaplain.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well,
who did you meet and what did you do?
Well, Don Ganung was the security man.
And by the way, that's in
this
book.
Yeah, there are 3 chapters
between
about
the devil and the deep.
Yeah, there are 3 chapters in there about Woodstock. Anyway, Don Ganung came over. He was an ex-Episcopal priest, and he brought a bottle of Gallo wine with him. And through the night we drank, and all of a sudden the Spirit hit me, and I made a stupid statement, and I said, "Why don't we have a chaplain for Woodstock?" And he said, "That sounds like a great idea." And we talked about that a little while. And the next morning I woke up and thought, I didn't say that. And he called me later on. He says, "I talked to the principals. You're on, man."
So which was very interesting. We were talking about this previously. So first of all, you met some very famous groups.
Yeah.
By being the chaplain in Woodstock.
Right.
And you had some very good observation about, we'll say this one first, as a chaplain, what did you officiate at Woodstock, and what interesting observation about the people of those times did you tell me versus today?
Well, when I came back from missionary work, I was very disappointed in the American youth because I had to scramble and work hard, several different jobs to get through college, and here these guys had time to take off and go out.
They had to go through a gang.
That's right. Yeah, and all they did would go out and they would riot, and they would break into offices and things like that, and I couldn't understand them.
And protest the government.
Yeah, they were protesting the government and the war. Although I did not agree with the war, I wasn't protesting it. And so what I found out at Woodstock was there became a change. Most of my time was spent talking, counseling, listening to what they were saying. And I felt very much that was the turning point in the youth in the 60s, to turn from going out and just rioting and sit-downs and things. They decided then, I believe, that the best way to change things was from the inside. And many of the really weirdest people that were at Woodstock became mayors and city councilmen and all kinds of...
They became part of the system.
They became part of the system to try to work from the inside out, which they also found I didn't think didn't work very good either. But that's what happened.
That's the best system around.
Yeah.
No one says democracy is 100%.
No.
But it's better than what's out there.
That's right.
Okay.
And I've experienced other things that have been out there.
That is not democracy.
That's not democracy, right. Anyway, that was one of the big things. I got a bunch of them back to their homes while I was there. They wanted to go
so
home.
that was very important because I mentioned there were other books of those
Yeah.
periods, and it was a big issue of kids that ran away from
Right.
home and they couldn't get back home. That was
That's
a very
right.
important issue.
Well, they came to me wanting me to run interference for them, get home, and so I called them, and
You called their parents.
Called their parents. No charge to the parents. I tried first calling collect, but they would never accept collect calls.
Your son's calling, nope.
Yeah. So I called them straight on, and I ran up a huge bill with the Woodstock people. I don't know how big it was, but it had to be big. And I would talk to the parents, and then if the parents would, I'd have them talk to their daughter or son. Generally, it was the thing, has he cut his hair yet? I don't want to talk to him if he hadn't cut his hair.
And that today would be so ridiculous.
It would
In those
be.
days, it was a big thing.
It was a huge thing.
It was a huge thing. And do they still have bell bottoms?
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah. Anyway, they...
Today, do they have clothes on?
Yeah, there were only 10, 15 people didn't wear clothes. And they were all in the same area. And of course, that's where all the cameramen were.
So that was the nudist beach in Woodstock.
Yeah, there was a little lake, and at one end of the lake, the girls took their shower. That's the only thing you had to take a bath with was that lake. At the other end of the lake, the men did, and in the middle were the nudists. And it was kind of funny. But I worked very hard with various groups like the Hog Farm, which was a big, what do you call it, places where everybody lived together, not knowing whose babies were who and things. I worked close with them. They fed me most of the time, farina. And then I worked with the Grateful Dead at their stage for a while. I had about 50 guys, girls and boys, they shouldn't be guys, men and women, who went out and I would send messages to stage. We're looking for these people. You know, the parents had called up and said, I would like, if my son and daughter, I would like to talk to them. And so we sent these guys out to do announcements at stages. And
is any of that on film? Like
No.
people making announcements? Is
well, I
so-and-so
don't
here?
know. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Interesting.
They
So
would
which
announce
other-
in between acts. And
Which famous rock groups were you said you told
Well,
me some.
I-
The one you were in the helicopter
yes,
with.
I was in a helicopter with the airplane,
With Jefferson Airplane.
Jefferson Airplane. Yeah.
So what was the funny story you said about that?
Well-
hope they don't get back to us about it though.
I was finally had gotten home to have a service on Sunday morning, which I was supposed to have. And after the service, I came home and my wife was going crazy. We had already gotten enough trouble with the parish by doing this chaplaincy thing. I had to resign to do it. And landing a helicopter in the front yard of where I was living was not the thing that would...
And you said the reason why you had a helicopter at Woodstock was because that's how they were transporting food.
That's right. You
and
couldn't
the
get
people,
in.
You couldn't get in.
Right. And I told them no, I would meet them at an airport. So I went to Monticello Airport, I think it was. I didn't know why I was going there. And when I got there, I was told that they were having trouble with the Jefferson Airplane because it wouldn't stay in the helicopter. It was a big old Huey helicopter and just had little bands webbing to hold people in. And they were hanging out and the pilot refused to take off. And so I had to get in the helicopter with them and calm them down, make them sit if I could. And we had one guy the drummer, he wanted to fly. He wanted to fly out over all these people. And I tried to keep him in for a while, but finally I said, this is stupid. I said, all right, go fly, but don't hit any of your admirers down there. That's the people who love you. Don't hit them and kill them. I'm going to sit down here. You do what you want. And so I did. I sat down, and he chickened out because there was nobody to hold him back, so he went and sat down too. And we made it to Woodstock in time.
Any other groups besides Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane?
Grateful Dead, and yes, I met Janis Joplin. And I met
Well, she was one of those
Hendrix.
people that had problems with her parents.
Right. I met Jimi Hendrix, and he was stoned pretty bad.
That was well known.
Anyway, yeah, I met those people. I also met a bunch of gang members of the Hells Angels.
They were there too? They were protecting or something, or helping
Well,
out?
they weren't doing anything except
okay.
they pulled me out from under a truck. I'd gone to sleep trying to find a place to sleep where I wouldn't be bothered. They pulled me out and scolded me because we had somebody get run over a day or so before, and they had scolded me. But then what they wanted me to do is do some counseling with one of their girls who was pregnant, and her husband had been in prison for 3 years. So she didn't know what to do about that situation. So we talked about those types of things. And then 2 days on Sunday afternoon, about the time Blood, Sweat, and Tears were playing, one of my favorite groups, I got called on my radio by the security people saying, you have to go down behind the stage because we got a problem, and we think you can settle it. So I went down there. You know, you always throw the chaplain in first. If he gets killed, it's a bad situation. So I went down there, and it was Hells Angels versus the state police. Oh. And there were 2 cop cars down there, and the state police were out there with their hands on their hips, and the Hells Angels were standing by their bikes, and the leader out in front yelling at the state police to let them go. The state police didn't want them to leave.
Why not?
Well, because of all the crowds and things like that, it would have been a bad thing. But nobody asked them why they wanted to leave. You know, you just can't leave. You know. So I went down and I yelled at the head of the Hells Angels and told him what I thought of him causing a problem when I wanted to see, you know, the Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And so he calmed down. I said, what's the problem? He says, well, we want to go out and get some cigarettes. We're out of cigarettes. And the cops heard him say that, and they said, oh, is that the problem? And they went for the trunk of their car. Now, that's a bad place to go to because in there are shotguns and all kinds of bad stuff, tear gas. And so it was very tense. And they opened it up and brought out several cartons of cigarettes and started passing them out to the Hells Angels.
Contraband from some other things.
That's right, yeah.
Cool.
So they solved that problem. So I had a lot of fun. I learned later on that the Hells Angels had made me their chaplain too, but that wasn't until about 10 years later when I was working in...
And did you have that in this book, about that?
I don't know whether I did or not.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something that I just realized. So we'll jump from this book
to this
book. Why? Because in here you also talk about how you had an issue with the Spanish inmates that were getting very angry.
Oh, yeah.
Because they didn't want to eat potatoes, and nobody knew what was making them angry because they spoke Spanish, and you did.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. You officiated in South America.
Right.
And they wanted rice and beans instead of potatoes because they weren't brought up on potatoes.
That's right. They hated potatoes.
And the warden, nobody knew what's going on, and it was so easy to solve if you only listened. What the problem was.
My clerks let me know that there was something going on. That's a great thing of having clerks. Chaplains have to have a clerk because that's their conduit to the whole institution. And I was able to find out from the guys that they were tired of fried potatoes in the morning, boiled potatoes at night, and baked potatoes at lunch or whatever. And they wanted rice and beans. So I was able to go up to the warden and say, Warden, this is what, if you give them rice and beans tonight, it'll stop the riot that's in the preparation stages. And he did, and we didn't have a riot. But, you know, people don't always think that different cultures have different things they like to eat.
And sometimes you just, like you said before, the Woodstock thing, you just have to ask them what they want.
That's right. Just have to ask them what they want. So that's what I did that. Yeah, I had several encounters. Had a bunch of Cubans that were in Terminal Island that they came in when they started. We had a big riot in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know exactly. It must have been 85 or 86, someplace in there. And so they shipped a bunch of Cubans down from another prison to keep them safer. And they arrived, and they were all putting out fruit out on their little lockers and in front of statues, and they were Catholic statues. But I knew it was Santeria. But the officers didn't know that, and they didn't bother to contact me to see what they were doing. They just knocked this stuff off onto the floor and almost caused a riot. And finally they called me and said, maybe the chaplain can do something. And I told them, I understand. You have to make your votive to your saint, your Santeria, I can't even say it, Santeria, forget it. Anyway, so I told them that I would set up a special place in chapel where they can have that, and that solved the problem. And then I told the cops if they...
So it worked out well that you were around different places in the world.
If I hadn't been there. Yeah, I think that's God's preparation.
Prepared you when he sent you down there.
Yeah.
For meeting the different peoples that
right.
are in the prison system and helping them out, being a conduit.
Being in the gang, to learning Spanish, to working in prison.
Well, it just goes to show you, everything you learn, this is something I know from my own experience in life, everything you learn you can use one day.
Absolutely.
There's no such thing as, the only thing is when I throw out an old business card, then it's been 10 years, and then I just threw it out, and guess what, now I need it. So you talked a little bit about prison, and we talked about how you were in the gangs at one time. And so you wrote this book about your experiences in prison. Tell us a little bit about that and your favorite story from the book.
I waited 20 years. For 20 years, I had these voices in my mind. I would go to sleep, and I would see these stories. But I didn't want to put them on paper.
But they're true stories.
They're true stories, absolutely true. There may be some variation in the dialogue, but it was the best I could remember it. They stuck with me. These particular ones stuck with me. The really bad guys didn't stick with me at all, but these did. And I wanted to wait until maybe they had graduated before I came out and did this. Yeah, I had all kinds of people there. I had Red, who was a young kid about 19 years old who liked to eat glass and nails and everything else, and that I'd have to do I have to exorcise the devil from him every month or so. We had a kid that went out, and his wife wanted more and more money. He decided he was going to have. He stopped by on his bicycle to a drive-up teller and tried to rob the bank, which is about as stupid as you could possibly be.
On a bike.
On a bicycle, yeah. He got caught three
blocks.
He said the worst thing was the teller just laughed at me and went like that on the button. Let me read you about the preacher. The preacher's the first one in this book, and he was very interesting. This was in a young adult institution from the ages 18 to 26 or so, and the preacher was in that age group someplace. He was big guy. He must have been 6 feet and 4 feet wide.
The preacher being the inmate?
That's the inmate.
Okay.
That's the inmate. The inmate was a large African-American, tall and round, and they called him the preacher. The appellation came from the fact that he carried a large family Bible. It had a leather binding and was 20 inches long, 12 inches wide, and at least 8 inches thick. It must have been very heavy, but he always had it with him. He had it in the dining room, carried it into the yard, and it sat beside him at his work assignment, and according to other inmates, he took it to bed. But he never attended chapel. I wondered why the man who was so religious did not come to service. Okay, one day I saw him on the yard. "Hi there," I said. Got a minute?" "Sure, chaplain," he said in a deep southern drawl. "How is it I never see you in chapel on Sunday?" He shifted his big Bible from one hand to the other, and his eyes narrowed as if he was thinking deeply. Then he said, pointing to the Bible, "This is all I need to keep me going, chaplain. I don't need no church. As long as I got the Word of God by me, I'm okay." You just need the Bible," I said. "Yes, sir." He looked at the Bible seriously. "You know, chaplain, the Bible is food for the soul. Can't go wrong with the Word of God." He looked away. "Got to go now, chaplain." He turned and walked toward his dormitory, the Bible tucked tightly under his arm. I stood for a moment watching him. I know that the Word of God is important in our lives, but something seemed wrong. Maybe I was just jealous that he did not need a chaplain. As the weeks passed by, I noticed preacher in the compound and recreation yard, always with his big Bible. When we passed each other, he would greet me with, "How you doing, chaplain?" and a big smile. One day, preacher had an accident as he left the chow hall. There were 6 steps in front of the building, and he missed a step and fell down. I happened to be nearby and rushed to help him. "My Bible," he yelled as he lay on the ground. "Where's my Bible?" An inmate and I helped him up. He seemed in good shape, but we decided to take him to the hospital to be checked over. But he kept yelling for his Bible. It was laying at the bottom of the stairs. It had fallen open, and there, in a neatly carved out hollow, was half a fried chicken. The preacher's secret was out. For years he had used his Bible as an extra lunchbox. The food within had surely sustained his hunger. I started laughing uncontrollably, but he still remained known as the preacher. Yeah.
So that concludes the end of our show.
Okay.
So very quickly, you have Between the Devil and the Deep. Your stories about your travels around the world.
Right.
And
There's
your
also
life and how you
stories
became-
of sailing in it, too.
and sailing.
Half of
Well,
it.
traveling around the world sailing.
Yeah. Traveling around, sailing, and then my life
And
story.
The Voices from Prison.
Prison.
And one quick one about your grandson. And you wrote
This is a Tenderfoot Dude, and it was written partially. The idea came from my 2 grandchildren, Austin and Rachel, and it's a pre-teen novel.
and it's about also how you have to be, how to succeed in life.
Right, you
and
have
how
to
solve
work
issues.
past what you think you can't do.
Well, my
Stretch
pleasure.
to the end. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.